The bitter wind howled across the Colorado mountains like a wounded beast, rattling the small cabin's windows with such force that Zara Turner feared they might shatter. It was February 1878, and what had begun as an adventure into the wilderness had transformed into a desperate fight for survival as the worst blizzard in decades trapped them in this remote hunting cabin outside Pueblo, Colorado. "The fire's dying again," Zara said, her breath visible even inside the cabin. At 24, she had never imagined facing death in such a manner, slowly freezing while the snow piled higher against the door. "I'll add more wood. We barely have any left," her companion, Zoe Taylor, replied with a trembling voice. The 22-year-old schoolteacher pushed a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, the usual sparkle in her green eyes now dimmed by fear. 3 days' worth, if we're lucky." Zara moved to the window, wiping away the frost with her sleeve. Outside, the snow had nearly reached the windowsill, and still it fell in thick, relentless sheets. The two women had set out from Pueblo a week earlier, Zara to photograph the winter landscape for the Denver newspaper she worked for, and Zoe to collect plant specimens for her classroom before the spring thaw. "We should have listened to Mr. Jenkins at the general store," Zara said, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "He warned us about the changing weather. And we should have turned back when we saw those dark clouds," Zoe added, pulling her woolen blanket tighter around her shoulders. "But you just had to get the perfect shot for your newspaper." Zara bit her lip, guilt washing over her. It had been her idea to push forward, convinced they could reach the cabin before the storm hit. They had barely, but now they were trapped with dwindling supplies, no way to communicate with town, and a blizzard that showed no signs of relenting. "I'm sorry," Zara whispered, sitting beside Zoe on the rough wooden floor near the fireplace. "This is my fault." Zoe's expression softened. "No, I could have insisted we turn back. Besides, who could have predicted a storm this severe? Even the old-timers in town said they hadn't seen anything like it in 20 years. The two women huddled closer together, sharing body heat as the temperature continued to drop. They had met just 6 months ago when Zara moved to Pueblo to work for the newspaper. Zoe had been one of the first to welcome her, inviting her to dinner and showing her around town. Their friendship had blossomed quickly, surprising them both with its depth. "Tell me about Philadelphia again," Zoe requested, her teeth chattering despite their proximity to the fire. "I want to think about somewhere warm." Zara smiled, remembering the bustling city streets and her family's comfortable home. "The summers are hot and humid, nothing like the dry heat here. My father's printing shop would get so warm that we'd keep all the windows open, and the smell of ink would mix with the scent of my mother's roses from the garden." "It sounds lovely," Zoe murmured, her eyes half closed. "I've never been east of Kansas City." "When we get out of here," Zara promised, "I'll take you to visit. My parents would adore you." "If we get out of here," Zoe corrected, her voice small. Zara squeezed her friend's hand. "We will. Someone will come looking for us when we don't return to town tomorrow as planned." But as she spoke the words, Zara couldn't help but wonder if anyone would be able to find them beneath the layers of snow, or if they would even attempt such a rescue in these conditions. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further. They moved their bedrolls directly beside the hearth, sleeping in shifts to maintain the fire. Zara took the first watch, adding precious logs to the flames sparingly while Zoe slept fitfully beside her. Looking at her friend's face in the firelight, Zara felt a wave of protectiveness. Zoe had become dear to her in ways she hadn't anticipated when they first met. The thought of anything happening to the gentle schoolteacher made Zara's chest tighten painfully. Outside, the wind continued its mournful song, and Zara prayed silently for morning to bring clear skies. But dawn brought only more snow. The door was now completely blocked, and a growing drift had begun to cover the windows. The cabin, built by hunters for temporary use, had never been designed to withstand such an onslaught. "We should try digging out," Zara suggested on the third day, desperation edging into her voice. Their food supplies were running dangerously low. Zoe shook her head. "With what? Our hands? The only shovel is outside in the lean-to, and we can't even get to the door. Besides, we'd freeze to death before making it a quarter-mile in this." She was right, of course. The temperature outside was well below freezing, and neither of them had clothing suitable for trudging through waist-deep snow. That night, as they rationed the last of their beans and jerky, Zara noticed Zoe shivering more violently than before. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked, pressing a hand to her friend's forehead. "You're burning up." Zoe tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Just a bit under the weather. Nothing serious." But by morning, it was clear something was very wrong. Zoe's face was flushed with fever, her breathing labored, and she could barely sit up without assistance. "I think it's pneumonia," Zara said, trying to keep the panic from her voice. She had seen it before in her youngest brother 2 winters ago. "You need a doctor." "Not much chance of that," Zoe whispered, her voice raspy. "Unless he can fly through blizzards." Zara felt tears welling in her eyes. "Don't joke. This is serious." "I know," Zoe replied, reaching for Zara's hand. "But if this is how it ends for me, I'm glad I'm not alone. I'm glad I'm with you." "Don't talk like that," Zara scolded, wiping away her tears angrily. "You're not going to die. I won't let you." She boiled snow water and made Zoe drink as much as she could. She tore strips from her own petticoat to create cool compresses for Zoe's forehead. She told stories from her childhood, sang songs, anything to keep Zoe awake and fighting. On the 5th day, the firewood ran out completely. Zara began breaking apart the cabin's single chair, feeding the pieces into the dying flames. When that was gone, she eyed the table and the crude bookshelf, calculating how long they might burn. "Don't," Zoe murmured from her bedroll. "You'll destroy the cabin." "I don't care about the cabin," Zara snapped, more harshly than she intended. "I care about keeping you warm." As darkness fell again, Zara curled around Zoe's feverish body, trying to share what warmth she had left. Outside, the wind had finally begun to calm, but the damage was done. They were buried, forgotten, 2 women alone in a vast wilderness of white. "Zara," Zoe whispered, her voice so weak it was barely audible. "If I don't make it, you will," Zara interrupted fiercely. "Listen to me," Zoe insisted. "If I don't, I want you to know that meeting you was one of the best things that ever happened to me. You made Pueblo feel like home." Zara felt something break inside her chest. "You're my home too," she admitted, the words coming out before she could consider them. "Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." Zoe's smile was faint but genuine. "I felt the same way. I just never knew how to tell you." They lay in silence then, the confession hanging in the air between them, both too exhausted and afraid to explore what it might mean. As Zara drifted into an uneasy sleep, she thought she heard something outside, a sound different from the constant moaning of the wind. It sounded almost like voices? Surely she was dreaming. But then it came again, louder this time. A shout, followed by the distinctive sound of metal scraping against snow. "Zoe," she whispered, shaking her friend gently. "Zoe, I think someone's out there." Zoe's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever. Zara struggled to her feet, her limbs stiff from cold and inactivity. She stumbled to the window, but it was completely covered in snow. The sounds continued, closer now, and unmistakably human. "Hello?" she tried to call, but her voice emerged as little more than a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder. "Hello. "We're in here." There was a pause in the sounds outside. Then a muffled voice called back, "Stand away from the door." Zara retreated to Zoe's side, pulling her friend's limp form into her arms as they waited. Minutes passed, and then the distinct sound of shoveling resumed, growing louder. Suddenly, there was a crack as the weight against the door shifted. With a final thrust, the door burst open, sending a cascade of snow into the cabin. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the blinding white landscape, stood a tall figure holding a shovel. As he stepped into the dim cabin, Zara could make out his features, a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of beard, intense blue eyes, and a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore a thick sheepskin coat crusted with snow and ice, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the cold. "Thank God," he breathed, taking in their condition with a quick, assessing glance. "I wasn't sure anyone would still be alive in here." "My friend is sick," Zara said, finding her voice. "She needs a doctor." The man moved quickly to their side, kneeling to examine Zoe. "Pneumonia by the looks of it. We need to get her to town." He looked up at Zara, his expression softening. "You're not alone anymore. I'm going to get you both out of here." "Who are you?" Zara asked, still half convinced she might be hallucinating from hunger and cold. "Thaddeus Sullivan," he replied, already moving to gather their meager belongings. "Most folks just call me Sully. I've got a horse and sled outside. The storm finally broke this morning, and I set out as soon as it was safe." The school children were worried when Miss Taylor didn't return. "How did you find us?" Zara asked, helping to bundle Zoe in all the blankets they had. "I'm a tracker by trade," he explained, his movements efficient and practiced. "And I know these mountains better than most. When Mr. Jenkins mentioned where you ladies were headed, I had a fair idea which cabin you'd aimed for." He glanced at the nearly dead fire and the broken furniture. "Looks like I got here just in time." Working together, they carried Zoe to the waiting sled. Thaddeus had prepared it well, with thick fur robes and heated stones wrapped in flannel to provide warmth during the journey. As they settled Zoe among the furs, Thaddeus turned to Zara. "It's about 4 hours back to town if we push hard. Can you hold on that long?" Zara nodded, though exhaustion pulled at every limb. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just save her." Something flickered in Thaddeus's eyes. "Respect, perhaps. She means a lot to you." "Everything," Zara replied simply. He nodded once, then helped Zara onto the sled beside Zoe. "Hold her tight. Keep her warm. I'll get you both home safe, I promise." As the horse pulled them through the snow-laden forest, Zara held Zoe close, whispering encouragements in her ear. Behind them, Thaddeus Sullivan guided the horse with expert hands, his tall figure a steady presence against the vast whiteness surrounding them. For the first time in days, Zara felt a flicker of hope. They were not alone anymore. The journey to Pueblo seemed both endless and fleeting. Thaddeus guided the horse through the deep snow with remarkable skill, finding paths where none seemed to exist. Occasionally, he would call back to check on them, his deep voice carrying clearly in the crisp air. "How's she doing?" "Still breathing, but the fever hasn't broken," Zara would reply, clutching Zoe closer. As they traveled, Zara learned that Thaddeus had been away on a hunting expedition when the blizzard hit, taking shelter in a cave he knew well. Upon returning to town and hearing about the missing women, he had volunteered immediately to search for them. "Most folks thought it was a fool's errand," he admitted during a brief stop to rest the horse. "Said you'd both be long dead by now." "Why did you come then?" Zara asked, accepting the canteen of water he offered. Something like a smile crossed his weathered face. "I don't much care for what most folks think. Besides, Miss Taylor's got half the town wrapped around her finger with that kind heart of hers. Couldn't bear the thought of not trying." Zara's respect for the quiet cowboy grew. "And what about me? You didn't know me at all." "I've seen your photographs in the newspaper," he replied, checking the horse's harness. "Always thought they captured something special about our little corner of the world. Seemed ashamed to lose someone with eyes that see beauty where others might miss it." Before Zara could respond, he was already moving again, urging the horse forward through the snow. As the afternoon waned, Zoe's condition deteriorated. Her breathing became more labored, and despite the heated stones and furs, she couldn't seem to get warm. Zara held her friend tightly, whispering prayers and promises into her ear. "Stay with me, Zoe. We're almost home. Please, just hold on a little longer." When the town finally came into view, the relief was overwhelming. Thaddeus drove the sled straight to Dr. Morgan's house on the edge of town, not stopping for the curious onlookers who had gathered upon seeing them approach. The doctor, a portly man with kind eyes and a perpetually worried expression, took one look at Zoe and immediately ordered her brought inside. "Severe pneumonia," he declared after a brief examination. "We'll need to work quickly." For the next several hours, Zara refused to leave Zoe's side as the doctor administered various treatments. She helped bathe her friend in tepid water to bring down the fever, assisted in applying mustard plasters to her chest, and held her hand through the worst of the coughing fits. Thaddeus remained as well, making himself useful by stoking the fire, fetching supplies, and occasionally forcing Zara to eat something or take a brief rest. "You won't do her any good if you collapse," he insisted, his gruff tone belied by the gentle way he pressed a mug of broth into Zara's hands. As night fell, Dr. Morgan finally stepped back from the bed with a cautious sigh. "The fever's starting to break. If she makes it through the night, I believe she'll recover." Zara's legs nearly gave out from relief. Thaddeus was beside her instantly, a steady hand at her elbow. "I've got you," he said quietly. Those simple words, spoken with such certainty, broke something inside her. The tears she had been holding back for days finally spilled over, and she found herself sobbing against his broad chest. Rather than pull away in embarrassment, Thaddeus simply held her, one large hand awkwardly patting her back. "It's all right," he murmured. "You're both safe now. You did good, keeping her alive out there." Eventually, the tears subsided, and Zara pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she said, embarrassed by her outburst. "For everything." Thaddeus merely nodded, then cleared his throat. "I should check on the horse, make sure he's been properly tended to after the journey." As he left, Dr. Morgan approached with a knowing smile. "That's the most words I've heard Thaddeus Sullivan string together in one day since he came to these parts 3 years ago. Must be your charming influence, Miss Turner." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "He saved our lives. I'm just grateful." "Indeed," the doctor replied, his expression thoughtful as he checked Zoe's pulse once more. "Though I suspect Mr. Sullivan's interest might extend beyond mere neighborly concern, at least where you're concerned." Before Zara could formulate a response, Zoe stirred on the bed, her eyelids fluttering open. "Zara?" she called weakly. All thoughts of Thaddeus fled as Zara rushed to her friend's side, clasping her hand tightly. "I'm here. We made it, Zoe. We're safe." Over the next few days, Zoe's condition improved steadily under Dr. Morgan's care. Zara rarely left her side, sleeping on a cot in the same room and assisting with her care whenever possible. Thaddeus visited daily, often bringing small gifts: wildflower honey from his own beehives for Zoe's tea, fresh baked bread from the town bakery, or early spring flowers he'd found somehow despite the snow still blanketing much of the ground. "You don't need to keep bringing things," Zara told him one afternoon as he arrived with a basket of apples and a book of poetry. "You've already done more than enough." Thaddeus shrugged, his expression typically stoic. "Gives me a reason to check in. Make sure you're both recovering properly." From her bed by the window, Zoe smiled. "What Miss Turner means to say is thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Your visits brighten our days." A hint of color touched Thaddeus's tan cheeks. "Just doing what anyone would." "But they didn't," Zara pointed out quietly. "You did." Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them before Thaddeus looked away, clearing his throat. "Well, I should be going. Got some fence mending to see to before sundown." After he left, Zoe turned to Zara with a knowing look. "He comes to see you, you know." "Don't be ridiculous," Zara replied, busying herself with straightening the bed covers. "He's just being kind." "Thaddeus Sullivan has a reputation for keeping to himself," Zoe said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "People respect him for his tracking skills and his fair dealings, but he's not known for social calls. Yet here he is, day after day, with gifts and excuses to linger." Zara felt her face grow warm. "You're imagining things. Besides, we barely know each other. Sometimes you don't need much time to recognize something special," Zoe replied softly, reaching for Zara's hand. "I felt that way when I met you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Since their near confession in the cabin, neither had brought up the feelings they'd revealed to each other in what they thought might be their final moments. "Zoe, about what I said in the cabin." "You don't need to explain," Zoe interrupted, her smile gentle but tinged with sadness. "We were facing death. People say all sorts of things when they're afraid." "That's not," Zara began, but they were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Morgan for his afternoon examination. The moment passed, and Zara found herself both relieved and frustrated. The truth was, she didn't know how to articulate the complex feelings she had for Zoe, the deep friendship that had somehow blossomed into something more during their ordeal, especially now that Thaddeus Sullivan had entered their lives, stirring unfamiliar emotions of his own. A week after their rescue, Dr. Morgan declared Zoe well enough to return to her small house on the outskirts of town. Zara, who had been staying at the town's only hotel since Zoe's condition stabilized, immediately offered to move in temporarily to help with her recovery. "That's not necessary," Zoe protested weakly. "I can manage on my own." "Nonsense," Zara replied, brooking no argument. "You're still weak, and the doctor said you shouldn't exert yourself for at least another week. Besides, my room at the hotel is cramped and overpriced." The truth was, Zara couldn't bear the thought of Zoe alone in her house, potentially suffering a relapse with no one to help her. The memory of those frightening days in the cabin was still too fresh. Thaddeus volunteered his wagon to transport Zoe home, carefully helping her up onto the seat while Zara gathered their belongings. The ride through town attracted curious glances and waves from townspeople who had followed the story of their rescue with great interest. "Feels like we're putting on a parade," Zoe murmured, embarrassed by the attention. "People were worried about you," Thaddeus replied, his eyes on the road ahead. "Especially your students. They've been making you cards and drawings all week." "How do you know that?" Zara asked, surprised. A rare smile flicked across his face. "Mrs. Peterson at the general store keeps me informed. Nothing happens in Pueblo that she doesn't know about." Once they reached Zoe's modest home, Thaddeus insisted on carrying her inside despite her protests that she could walk. He deposited her gently on the sofa, then set about bringing in firewood and lighting the stove while Zara unpacked their things. "You'll need supplies," he said, surveying the kitchen. "I'll have Mrs. Peterson send over some staples: flour, sugar, coffee, that sort of thing. We can manage a trip to the store tomorrow," Zara began, but Thaddeus shook his head. "No need. Rest today. Get settled." His eyes moved to Zoe, who was already dozing on the sofa. "She still needs lots of rest." After he left, promising to return the next day to check on them. Zara busied herself with making the house comfortable. She prepared a light soup from the ingredients they had on hand, helped Zoe change into a clean nightgown, and settled her into the bedroom. "You take the bed," Zoe insisted. "I've been lying down for days. I'm happy on the sofa." But Zara wouldn't hear of it. "The doctor said you need proper rest. I'll be fine on the sofa." As darkness fell, Zara sat by the fire, contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been focused solely on her work for the newspaper, determined to prove herself as a serious photographer in a field dominated by men. Now, here she was, playing nursemaid to a woman who had come to mean more to her than she could have imagined, while also navigating unexpected feelings for the taciturn cowboy who had saved their lives. True to his word, Thaddeus returned the next morning with a wagon full of supplies far more than the basic staples he had mentioned. "Mrs. Peterson may have gotten carried away," he admitted as he unloaded sacks of flour, sugar, coffee, dried fruits, canned goods, and even a freshly baked pie. And a few of the other ladies in town contributed as well. They're eager to help Miss Taylor recover. Zara was touched by the town's generosity. "This is overwhelming. Please thank everyone for us." Thaddeus nodded, then hesitated before pulling a small package from his coat pocket. "This is, just from me. For you." Curious, Zara unwrapped the simple brown paper to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of quality pencils. "I noticed you lost your camera in the ordeal," he explained, shifting uncomfortably under her surprised gaze. "Thought maybe you could sketch what you see until you get a replacement. You've got an eye for beauty that shouldn't go to waste." Zara was speechless for a moment, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you. I used to sketch before I took up photography." "How did you know?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Just a hunch. You've got artist's hands." Before she could ask what he meant by that, Zoe appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a quilt. "My goodness. Did you buy out the entire general store, Mr. Sullivan?" As the days passed, a routine developed. Zara would care for Zoe, whose strength returned gradually, allowing her to resume some of her normal activities. In the afternoons, several of Zoe's students would visit, bringing drawings and eager questions about her adventure in the mountains. Thaddeus came by almost daily, often with some small pretense: a leaky roof that needed fixing, a window that wouldn't close properly, fresh game he'd hunted that was too much for just one person. Zara found herself looking forward to his visits, enjoying his quiet competence and the rare moments when he would open up about his life. She learned that he had come west from Missouri after the war, seeking solitude and a fresh start after losing his younger brother in the conflict. He had worked as a ranch hand, a tracker for the army, and briefly as a deputy marshal before settling outside Pueblo with his small herd of cattle and horses. "I prefer animals to people most days," he admitted one evening as they sat on Zoe's porch, watching the sunset. "They don't judge, don't ask complicated questions." "Is that why you live so far from town?" Zara asked, sipping the coffee he had brought. He considered this, his blue eyes reflective in the fading light. "Partly, but mostly I like the quiet. Helps me think." "What do you think about, all alone out there?" His gaze shifted to her face, unexpectedly intense. "Lately, not so much alone." The implication hung in the air between them, causing Zara's heart to beat a little faster. Before she could respond, Zoe called from inside, needing help with something, and the moment passed. That night, as Zara settled onto the sofa that had become her bed, Zoe perched on the edge beside her, her expression troubled. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "About Thaddeus Sullivan." Zara felt a flutter of unease. "What about him?" "I see the way he looks at you," Zoe said quietly. And the way you sometimes look at him when you think no one notices. Zoe, please, let me finish, Zoe interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. What we said to each other in that cabin, those feelings, they were real for me. But I care about you too much to hold you to words spoken when we thought we might die. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. They were real for me too. Zoe smiled sadly. I know, but sometimes life offers us unexpected paths. Thaddeus is a good man. He saved our lives, and I think he could make you happy. And what about you? Zara asked, reaching for her friend's hand. What about your happiness? I've always known that my feelings for you might never be returned in quite the same way, Zoe admitted. I treasure our friendship above all else, and I would never want to jeopardize that. Besides, she added with a forced lightness, a schoolteacher with unconventional feelings isn't likely to find much acceptance in a town like Pueblo. Zara's heart ached at the resignation in Zoe's voice. You deserve happiness too, and I'll find it, Zoe assured her, squeezing her hand before standing. But for now, I want you to feel free to explore whatever is growing between you and Thaddeus. No guilt, no hesitation on my account. As Zoe retreated to her bedroom, Zara lay awake for hours, conflicted. Her feelings for Zoe were deep and real, but different somehow from the unexpected attraction she felt toward Thaddeus. With Zoe, there was comfort, understanding, a meeting of minds and souls. With Thaddeus, there was something wild and unexpected, a spark she couldn't quite define. Spring arrived in earnest, melting the last remnants of snow and bringing new life to the mountains. Zoe returned to teaching, her students overjoyed to have her back. Zara received a new camera from Denver and resumed her work for the newspaper, though she kept Thaddeus's journal, filling it with sketches and thoughts. Thaddeus continued his visits, though now they often took the form of invitations: a ride to see a particularly beautiful view, a fishing expedition to his favorite stream, even a town dance that left Zara surprised that the solitary cowboy would suggest such a thing. I don't much care for crowds, he admitted as they walked home under the stars after the dance. But I find I don't mind them so much when you're there. Zara smiled, touched by the confession. I'm honored to make crowds bearable for you, Mr. Sullivan. Thaddeus, he corrected, stopping to look down at her. After all we've been through, I think you can call me by my given name. Thaddeus? She repeated, liking the way it felt on her tongue. They stood there in the moonlight, something unspoken passing between them. For a moment, Zara thought he might kiss her, but instead, he merely offered his arm to continue their walk. Miss Turner, Zara, he began, then stopped, seeming to gather his thoughts. I'm not much good with words, never have been, but I want you to know that these past weeks, getting to know you, they've meant a great deal to me. Zara's heart quickened. They've meant a great deal to me too. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. I've got a small ranch about 5 miles outside town. It's nothing fancy, but the land is good, and I've been adding to the herd each year. I've been thinking it might be nice to have someone to share it with. It wasn't quite a proposal, but the implication was clear. Zara felt a rush of conflicting emotions: surprise, flattery, uncertainty. Thaddeus, you don't need to answer now, he said quickly, or ever if you don't want to. I just wanted you to know where I stand, what I'm hoping for. They reached Zoe's house, where Zara was still staying, though she had begun looking for a place of her own in town. Thaddeus walked her to the door, then tipped his hat in farewell. Think about it, he said simply, then turned and walked back toward where his horse was tethered. Inside, Zara found Zoe still awake, reading by lamplight. One look at Zara's face, and Zoe set her book aside. What happened? I think Thaddeus just proposed, Zara said, sinking into a chair. Or at least, suggested that we might have a future together. And how do you feel about that? Zoe asked, her expression carefully neutral. I don't know, Zara admitted. He's kind and brave, and there's something about him that draws me to him. But what? Zara met her friend's gaze directly. But then there's you. Whatever this is between us. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. I meant what I said before. I want you to be happy, Zara. If Thaddeus can give you that, you shouldn't let me stand in the way. It's not that simple, Zara protested. No, Zoe agreed with a sad smile. It rarely is. The next day, Zara rode out to Thaddeus's ranch, needing to see the place he had offered to share with her. He was surprised by her arrival but pleased, immediately offering to show her around. The ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy 2-room cabin, a barn, and several corrals. A small creek ran through the property, and the view of the mountains was spectacular. She could see why he loved it here: the peace, the connection to the land, the sense of building something lasting. It's beautiful, she told him honestly as they sat on his porch, drinking coffee. It could be more, he said, his eyes on the horizon. With the right person to share it. Zara took a deep breath. Thaddeus, I'm honored by what you're offering, truly. But I need to be honest with you about something. He turned to look at her, his expression guarded. Go on. My feelings for you are real, she began carefully. But they're complicated. There's someone else who holds a piece of my heart as well. His jaw tightened slightly. I see. Someone back east. No, Zara replied, gathering her courage. Zoe. Thaddeus was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured. You and Miss Taylor. Nothing has happened between us, Zara clarified quickly. But during our time in the cabin, facing what we thought might be the end, certain feelings came to light, feelings that I'm still trying to understand. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. I appreciate your honesty. Can't say I'm not disappointed, but I respect you telling me the truth. Relief washed over her. You're not disgusted. No, he said simply. I've seen enough of life to know that love comes in many forms. Not my place to judge. He paused, then added, so you and Miss Taylor will be together? I don't know, Zara admitted. We haven't really discussed what it would mean, practically speaking. It's complicated, as you can imagine. Indeed, he agreed, then fell silent, staring out at his land. Zara stood, feeling she should leave him to his thoughts. I should be getting back to town. As she moved to go, he caught her hand, surprising her. Zara, wait. I said my piece yesterday, and I meant it. But I understand things are more complex than I realized. Take the time you need. My offer stands, whenever you're ready to consider it. His understanding moved her deeply. Thank you, Thaddeus, for everything. The ride back to town gave Zara time to think. Both Thaddeus and Zoe had offered her freedom to choose, putting her happiness above their own desires. The selflessness of both gestures made her decision even harder. That evening, when Zoe returned from school, Zara was waiting with dinner prepared and the table set with wildflowers freshly picked from the meadow behind the house. What's the occasion? Zoe asked, setting down her books. I wanted to talk, Zara replied, suddenly nervous. About us. About the future. They ate together, the conversation light at first, but eventually Zara gathered her courage. I went to see Thaddeus's ranch today. Oh, Zoe's voice was carefully neutral. And what did you think? It's lovely, peaceful. I can see why he loves it there. Zoe nodded, her eyes on her plate. Have you made a decision then? I told him about us, Zara said quietly. About my feelings for you. Zoe's head snapped up, her eyes wide. You did what? Zara, that was incredibly risky. He was understanding. Zara interrupted. More than I expected. But that's not the point. The point is, I've been trying to choose between two paths, when maybe there's a third option I haven't considered. What do you mean? Zoe asked, setting down her fork. Zara took a deep breath. Thaddeus mentioned that his ranch is doing well, but he could use help. He's been thinking of building a larger house. And you mentioned that the school committee is looking for someone to teach the advanced students, to prepare them for college. Yes, but I don't see. What if we all went into this with our eyes open? Zara suggested, her heart pounding. Thaddeus needs a partner for his ranch. You need somewhere to live that's closer to the school than this house. I need both of you in different ways. Zoe stared at her, incredulous. Are you suggesting that you marry Thaddeus but that you and I also? That we all live together? It's unconventional, I know, Zara admitted. But so are we. All of us in our own ways. Thaddeus chooses solitude over society's expectations. You challenge traditions by educating girls as thoroughly as boys. And I've never fit neatly into the role expected of women. But what would people say? Zoe whispered. They'd never understand. They wouldn't need to understand everything, Zara argued. They'd see a married couple and a respected schoolteacher sharing a home. Friends, to all appearances. The rest would be private. Zoe was silent for a long moment, considering. And you think Thaddeus would agree to this arrangement? I don't know, Zara admitted. But I think he deserves the chance to decide for himself. The next day, Zara asked Thaddeus to meet both her and Zoe for dinner at the hotel restaurant. He arrived punctually, hat in hand, looking somewhat perplexed by the formal invitation. Over a simple meal, Zara explained her proposal. Thaddeus listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, silent for so long that Zara feared she had offended him deeply. Finally, he spoke. Most men would walk away from such an unconventional arrangement. I understand, Zara said quickly. It was presumptuous of me to even suggest. I didn't say I was walking away, he interrupted, his blue eyes intense. I said most men would. But then, I've never much cared what most men do. Hope flickered in Zara's chest. What are you saying? I'm saying I need to think on it, he replied carefully. It's not a small thing you're asking, but neither am I dismissing it outright. He turned to Zoe, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. And you, Miss Taylor? Is this truly something you could live with? Sharing your life, your affections in such a manner? Zoe met his gaze steadily. I care deeply for Zara. I want her happiness above all else. If that means sharing her with a good man who also loves her, then yes, I believe I could accept that. Thaddeus nodded slowly. I'll give you my answer in a week's time. This requires considerable thought. True to his word, exactly 1 week later, Thaddeus arrived at Zoe's house with his decision. They sat together in the small parlor, the air tense with anticipation. I've thought long and hard about your proposal, he began, his deep voice measured. Prayed on it too, though I'm not much for church-going these days. And I've come to a conclusion. He looked directly at Zara. I love you. Have since I dug you out of that snow and saw the fire in your eyes, even half frozen and starving. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. His gaze shifted to Zoe. I respect you, Miss Taylor, your dedication to your students, your kindness, your quiet strength. I can see why Zara cares for you as she does. He took a deep breath. I'm willing to try this arrangement, unusual as it is, but I have conditions. Name them, Zara said eagerly. First, to the world, you would be my wife, Zara. We would be married properly in the church with all the vows that entails. I won't live a lie in that regard. Zara nodded. Of course. Second, Miss Taylor would be, to all appearances, a dear friend who helps with the household and any children we might have, in exchange for room and board and proximity to the school. A common enough arrangement that wouldn't raise eyebrows. That seems reasonable, Zoe agreed. Third, I would expect loyalty from both of you, not just to me but to our arrangement. No outside entanglements. What we build together stays between us. Both women nodded solemnly. And finally, he said, his expression softening slightly, I would ask that we all treat each other with kindness and respect. That we truly try to build something that works for all of us. I've seen too much bitterness and regret in this world. I won't add to it. Those are fair conditions, Zara said, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Do we have an agreement, then? Thaddeus extended his hand first to Zara, then to Zoe. We have an agreement. God help us all. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, a simple affair in the town's small church. Zoe stood as Zara's maid of honor, her smile genuine if touched with a hint of sadness. Thaddeus, in a new suit that couldn't quite hide his wranginess, looked at Zara with such naked adoration that several of the older women in attendance dabbed at their eyes. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterward, surprised but pleased by the match between the quiet cowboy and the spirited photographer from back east. The fact that the schoolteacher would be joining their household raised a few eyebrows, but most people accepted the explanation that the arrangement was practical for all involved. Miss Taylor will be much closer to the school, Mrs. Peterson commented approvingly, and Mrs. Sullivan will surely appreciate having another woman around, especially when the babies start coming. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Thaddeus began construction on a larger house almost immediately, with 3 bedrooms instead of 1. For appearances, he explained, though they all understood that the extra rooms might not always be used as intended. Zoe continued teaching, riding to town each morning on a gentle mare Thaddeus selected specifically for her. Her students thrived under her guidance, and the school committee, impressed by her results, approved her proposal for advanced classes. Zara divided her time between her photography work, which was gaining recognition beyond Pueblo, and helping with the ranch. She learned to cook properly under Zoe's patient instruction, discovered she had a knack for keeping the account books, and even developed a fondness for the chickens Thaddeus acquired at her request. At night, the arrangement they had agreed upon took shape organically. Sometimes Zara shared Thaddeus's bed, sometimes Zoe's, and occasionally they spent evenings together in the main room, talking late into the night before retiring to their separate chambers. There were awkward moments, jealousies to navigate, boundaries to establish, but they faced each challenge with honesty and the determination to make their unusual family work. By the time the new house was completed in late summer, they had found a balance that suited them all. The larger dwelling provided more privacy and space, allowing each of them room to breathe while still maintaining their connection. On the night they moved in, Thaddeus surprised both women by producing a bottle of fine whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. Under the stars, sitting on the porch of their new home, they toasted to the future they were building together. To unlikely beginnings, Thaddeus said, his usual reserve softened by the whiskey and the contentment of the moment. To finding family in unexpected places, Zoe added, her green eyes warm in the lamplight. To not being alone anymore, Zara finished, her heart full as she looked at the 2 people who had changed her life so completely. Winter came again, bringing with it memories of the blizzard that had brought them together. On the anniversary of their rescue, Zara insisted they visit the cabin where she and Zoe had nearly perished. Are you certain? Thaddeus asked, concerned. Those aren't pleasant memories. Not all of them were unpleasant, Zara replied, exchanging a meaningful look with Zoe. Besides, I want to photograph it properly this time, to remind us how far we've come. The cabin stood much as they had left it, though Thaddeus had returned in the spring to repair the damage they'd done burning the furniture for warmth. The three of them stood together in the small space, each lost in their own thoughts about the chain of events that had led them here. I never thanked you properly, Zoe said suddenly, turning to Thaddeus, for saving our lives, for everything that came after. No thanks needed, he replied gruffly. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Zara reminded him, echoing the words she'd spoken long ago. You did. As they prepared to leave, Zara set up her camera to capture the three of them standing together outside the cabin. Using the timer mechanism she'd recently acquired, she hurried to join Thaddeus and Zoe, standing between them as the shutter clicked. It would become her favorite photograph, one that would sit on their mantle for decades to come. Three unlikely companions, their faces young and full of promise, standing before the humble structure that had changed all their lives. The years that followed brought both joy and challenges. Zara gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas, a year after they moved into the new house. Thaddeus, typically stoic, wept openly when he first held his son, while Zoe hovered anxiously, ready to help in any way needed. Thomas was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Eliza, whose green eyes reminded them all of Zoe. Though not biologically hers, Zoe loved the children as fiercely as if they were, teaching them to read before they started school and nurturing their curious minds. The ranch prospered under Thaddeus's careful management and Zara's shrewd business sense. They acquired more land, increased the herd, and eventually hired hands to help with the work. Zara's photography business grew as well, her landscapes and portraits appearing in publications as far away as New York. Zoe eventually became the headmistress of the Pueblo school, implementing progressive teaching methods that drew attention from educators throughout Colorado. She never married, which occasioned some gossip in town, but her dedication to her students and her extended family at the Sullivan Ranch silenced most critics. Their arrangement remained their secret, though there were moments of tension when boundaries blurred or jealousies flared. They weathered each storm together, committed to the family they had created against all odds. As the children grew, they adapted their behavior to maintain propriety in public while nurturing the loving, if unconventional, household they had established. To Thomas and Eliza, it seemed perfectly natural to have two mothers who loved them and each other, alongside a father who cherished them all. We're lucky, 10-year-old Eliza remarked one evening as they sat together after dinner, Thaddeus whittling by the fire, Zoe reading aloud from a new novel, and Zara sketching the domestic scene. Jimmy Peterson only has one mother, and she's always too busy to listen to him. The adults exchanged glances, amused and touched by the child's perspective. Yes, Thaddeus agreed, his voice gentle. We are very lucky indeed. On the 20th anniversary of the blizzard that had brought them together, the three of them returned once more to the cabin in the mountains. The children, now young adults with lives of their own beginning to take shape, stayed behind at the ranch. The cabin had weathered the years well, maintained occasionally by Thaddeus as a hunting lodge and emergency shelter. Inside, they built a fire in the hearth and shared a bottle of wine, reminiscing about the journey that had led them here. Did you ever imagine, when you dug us out of the snow, that this is where we'd end up? Zara asked Thaddeus, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. He smiled, the expression coming more easily to him now after years of happiness. Not in my wildest dreams. I just wanted to save two women trapped in a snowbound cabin. Instead, I found my whole world. Zoe raised her glass. To unlikely rescues and the paths they reveal. To love in all its forms, Zara added. Thaddeus completed their toast, his voice warm with conviction. To never being alone again. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, nothing like the blizzard that had once imprisoned them. But inside, the warmth of the fire and their enduring love kept the cold at bay, just as it always had, just as it always would.